Hello, and welcome to the Real Jeff Armstrong podcast. So glad that you're here as always, and today we're going to be talking about finding your scalable, special superpower. And I'm very excited about it because this has been sort of my own experience that I'm going to now be sharing. Okay, here's how I went from, I don't really have anything that I have that is really quote unquote that unique, to slowly over time realizing there are things that make me pretty unique. And I found that over time I can take those things that make me pretty unique and begin turning them into something scalable. Scalable meaning that I can begin taking those gifts and then marketing them in a way that helps add to my overall income level. And when we do that, we make impact on other people's lives. And it's nice to create more freedom and to increase our income, right? So let's jump right into it. Number one thing I like to talk about when we start talking about superpower, right? Because I think that we hear that term and it's kind of like, what do you mean by that, right? When I say superpower, I mean something that makes you unique, something that is going to set you apart in a way that maybe not everybody quite grasps a particular subject the way that you do. Maybe, there's something that you have just found very, very natural that you almost don't even realize that it's a gift. And that doesn't mean that we don't work on certain things or develop certain skills, but usually there are things that we just find ourselves being pretty natural at. And so that is exactly what we're talking about here. And the reason that we want to find those things, number one, is because we do want to make impact in other people's lives. But number two, as entrepreneurs, we are looking for ways to build a more sustainable life that is full of freedom, that allows us to be able to live in a way that we want to live. And so, anything that can separate us, or not separate us, but cause us to stand out among a crowd is always going to help us, because we start developing these very valuable skills. And very often we have those somewhere deep down within inside us, and often because the skills are so inherent to who we are, we don't even notice them. And so it's like, okay, well, how do I, number one, even recognize what these skills are? And I say you usually want to look at your life and say, okay, what have people when they think of me, what is something that I'm kind of good at, that people are just kind of like, how are you so good at that? And I tend to think, okay, don't just think surface level, but go deeper. If you're good at photography, you're probably not just good at photography. You're probably good at something specific about photography, or there's something that you've learned that maybe the majority of people in your field have not necessarily learned, or maybe a lot of people want to learn about it. Now, if you don't think of anything immediately, it's okay to take some time, because again, these things are often so natural to you that you don't even necessarily see them right away. But I do say, think of the things that people are already asking you questions about, because if they're asking questions, they probably recognize you as a natural at that particular subject. So think of, okay, what are people asking me questions of? But if you still can't really come to any conclusions, like maybe the truth is that you just haven't discovered what your superpower is. Maybe you have yet to discover what it is that you're really, really natural at. And if that's the case, take the time to explore different subjects. Take the time to generate a curiosity about various different things, and just experiment and find out what you have a natural interest in, and then master it. Stick with it, master it, and then decide, okay, is this something that I really, really, really have skills in that I can help share with other people? And again, if people begin asking you questions, you're in groups where other people have these sorts of interests, and then they start asking you questions, or you can help answer questions. At that point, you're starting to find what your superpower is, okay? So there are things that keep us from discovering what makes us unique and what helps us stand out. And some of those things are lack of self-confidence. Like if you just really don't believe that you have this value, and that you have like the ability to be unique and be really good at things, that can affect your ability to discover and really grow your own self, and I'm trying to think how to say this, grow your own skills or recognize your skills as being valuable. Okay, so lack of self-confidence, guilt. Okay, guilt, I think, is one of those things that a lot of people struggle with guilt. A lot of people just have this sort of like, oh, I just don't deserve this. I don't, have the ability to really teach other people because of X, Y, Z. And we kind of have this level of guilt. Depression is another thing that I think that, we tend to put ourselves down and we don't measure up, and it may not even be connected to thoughts. Maybe, if you're struggling with something, even like, especially if it's clinical depression, like you may just be depressed. And, so of course you want to take we don't have time to go into all the ways that you can solve all your problems, right, within this podcast. That's not what we're going to go into right now. But, it's good to begin recognizing, okay, these are the things that are keeping me from making progress. Another thing that is kind of tied to the lack of self-confidence, believe it or not, is false humility, or like this false view of self. That can really keep you from actually being like acknowledging what you're good at. So it's very important to take the time to be soberly judgmental of yourself and think, okay, am I really good at this? Being arrogant can be the flip side of that. Like if you truly are arrogant and you don't ever actually take the time to humble yourself and think, okay, am I good at something? Because if you just think you're good at everything, then you're probably not likely to figure out what you're actually good at. So those are the things that can kind of keep you from finding out what your superpower is. But what I say is that if you can begin overcoming those mindset issues and start finding out what you love, and I'll share a personal example. I fell in love with, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what this was because it has to do with the company that I run, and I can't actually give out all the details just because of the back end contractual type stuff. So I fell in love with a particular product that I found to be just so much fun. Okay. And my wife was actually like, hey, you should stop buying all these things that you're buying. Like, because it's just, you're spending all this money on these things and you're creating a collection. And I was like, well, maybe I can sell them. And that was at first just be like, oh, I got to make up for the money I'm spending on this particular interest of mine. And so what I did was I actually made a website and started selling what I was interested in to other people. And believe it or not, there was other people that are interested in it. And they were looking for someone that could essentially solve their problems with these particular products. And that's what I did. So finding out, okay, what is it that I love and how can I turn that into something that is very, very unique? If you're interested in something and you're growing in something and you're mastering something, you'll start discovering that you have things that are unique. Now, again, I keep saying this over and over again, if people are asking you questions, that's a really good sign. But the thing is, if people don't know what you're interested in, they don't know your level of expertise, they're not going to ask you questions. So you've got to get your information out, even if it's just sharing your experience. So like there is a gentleman on YouTube he is not a millionaire, but he's documenting his journey to become a millionaire. And his YouTube channel is growing really, really popular. It's pretty fantastic. Even though he's not a millionaire, he's talking about like financial advice and everything, right? So the moral of that story is like, even if you haven't arrived, that doesn't mean you can't still have your own show, whether it be a blog or a podcast or YouTube or whatever it might be. You can share your journey, okay? And as you go on your journey, you're going to be ahead of some people, and you will have the next step as you continue making the next step along your pathway to mastery. And so, if you're a 6 on the scale from 0 to 10 in terms of how much you've mastered a particular subject, that means you've got... Really, I say anybody could learn from you, right? I mean, there are 5 people that are not quite as advanced as you are that you could teach, which now means that at least 50% of people could learn from you. But beyond that, 6s could probably learn from you. 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s probably could all learn from you to a degree as well. So that goes back to the whole mindset thing that just because even if you're 3 or a 4 or even a 1 doesn't mean that you can't still help people and or share your journey. So the next point that I'll make is you got to start getting your own show. You got to get your own outlet. Okay. So this can be a blog. It can be a podcast. It can be YouTube. It could be Instagram, but I tend to say that you really want to have your information somewhere that you can track the numbers on eventually. Now, maybe you don't want to do this right away, but let me give you an example. A blog, if you blog about something and it starts ranking on Google and people are finding it, and then they're like asking you questions in the comment section, wow, I've got all this traffic from this blog post, and man, like this is a really good subject. Well, you can begin recognizing that's your superpower, and we're not going to get into all the ways that you can scale that superpower because that's beyond the scope of this podcast, but there's other podcasts that we've talked about this a little bit, and there are very good ways to turn your superpower into a digital product like a course, or maybe like if you have a physical product even that you're interested in, doing like an e-commerce store or something along those lines. Your interests are all marketable if you know how to do it. But this podcast, we're mostly just talking about, okay, here's the way to discover that and begin making headway on that. So my recommendation to you would be get your own show. And I keep saying get your own show in the sense of like your outlet for sharing your journey / expertise / mastery / curiosities. And I actually get that concept from Russell Brunson, who talks about how you should have your own show. So I am a big fan of that, because as you have your own show, you're going to develop your voice. You're going to begin over time having people that follow you, interacting with you and your level of mastery and your curiosity. And so it's going to become a very, very good tool, even if you're not ready to, build a scalable business based on your superpower. Now it's going to help you down the road, and it's going to help you even with making connections with other people. So I recommend you've got to just get yourself out there, because if you just get yourself out there, you don't have to pretend you're more of an expert than you are. You don't have to be fake. You can share where you're at, and you can share your journey and make progress from there. So again, you can do a blog, you can do a podcast, you can do YouTube, you can post that kind of stuff on like Instagram or Facebook, but having those metrics, like with a blog where you can look in Google Search Console, or if you're using, a website like in Squarespace, you can look at analytics. Anything like that is very good, because you can start seeing how much interest is being generated in that particular subject. If you do a particular YouTube video that gets tons of views and gets tons of questions, and you're able to track those numbers, then that helps you to make decisions as you move forward, because you begin understanding yourself better. So that's my last tip, is to track the numbers and just kind of see what people start asking you about. And if you get to that point, you know that you've got something that is solving people's problems. You've become, to a degree, an expert in a particular subject. So just to sum it all up, you want to find your scalable superpower because it can bring impact. You can serve other people. It's scalable. More than likely. I mean, if it's a service-based thing, like, if you're a wedding photographer, or even if you're a landscaper, whatever you're doing, some of those things you can't necessarily scale, but you can find unique superpowers within those service-based skills that are scalable. You can overcome certain things like a lack of self-confidence, guilt, depression, false view of self, false humility, and discover something that you truly love, and then begin sharing your journey through your show, your blog, podcast, YouTube, whatever it may be, and do what you love, and then start over time tracking those numbers, interacting with people that are asking questions, and you'll begin discovering truly what your superpower is. So that's it for this time. As always, please reach out if you have any other thoughts or anything to add. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to comment if you have any thoughts or anything. Press the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, as I always like being able to keep up with everybody. So, thank you again so much for listening, watching, whatever you're doing. I appreciate it. And as always, I'll look forward to being with you next time.